so damn likable.
Yeah.
But I mean, the gender disparity on that, like if somebody comes up with a fantastic day in a debate and they have a penis, they're like, yeah, you get him. But if, God forbid, Liz Warren rips off fucking Bloomberg's arm and beats him to death with it, oh, now we're fucking upset about that? Yeah. Anyway, that's going to be the first line of our live. We're live now.
Start our show with like a string of F-bombs.
Fuck, pickle, shit, fuck, goddamn. Anyway, welcome to Hashtag Coffee. You know, we're all going to die. But before we do... We have Ash Gallagher in today, which is fantastic. Anybody who listened to Rachel's full show, I thought it was her A block, but her A block ran right into Lawrence O'Donnell last night. And it was all, you know, around the coronavirus and the fact that we should probably start at least pondering this. And again, we want to do it as responsibly and intelligently as we possibly can. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the debate last night. We're going to talk about South Carolina. We're going to talk about Super Tuesday. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court of the United States and how utterly shit-fucked that's going to be if we lose. Shit-fucked being the technical term. But maybe we should start on the whole Liz Warren likability thing. And we'll start with you, Ash, although I'm sure that the two dudes have feelings.
I have some serious opinions about this because I definitely caught clips from last night and then I caught little bits. I've said this, and that is, I don't actually think the debates are, I don't think they hold a huge amount of weight right now. I think they're just to kind of keep the blood flow of the elections going because we're going through these primaries. And there was definitely a lot of candidates sort of talking over each other last night. But I have seen so much social media today talking about Liz Warren's likability, and it makes me want to fucking scream because this is not a word that we use with male candidates whatsoever. And I'm over it. I don't know if any of you guys have seen, but I posted on my page today an amazing video called Be a Lady, they said, which has that actress from Sex and the City.
Okay.
And she talks about all the things that basically the patriarchy has told women to do. Your skirt is too short, your skirt is too long, you got to do this. It's an incredible video. I know a number of women in this community have watched it and even commented on it. But this is the thing, is that women are held to double, triple, and quadruple the standard to men when it comes to leadership positions. This happened in 2016, and it's happening again. Liz Warren starts to make a little bit of headway. She starts to actually make serious points. She's methodical. She's interesting. She actually works her ass off. I think Ann Coulter even had a very ridiculous tweet today about how she thought that Liz Warren would just run people into the ground and work hard to get every day to do 17 ridiculous plans, and how really Bernie was the better candidate because there's no way he could win against Trump, which is a resounding endorsement. I mean, the response on her feed is amazing. But I mean, that's the thing is that I am so exhausted from seeing patriarchal, and remember, patriarchy is a system. It's a system that hurts men. It's a system that hurts women, and most of the time, the people who are talking about it don't check their privilege and don't even check to know that they're even operating out of the privilege to say something like that. It's time for us to have a female leader. We're actually behind countries we've bombed on having a female head of state.
Show over. That's it.
Jack.
That's done.
So,
I want everyone to turn this off right now and reflect on that for the next 24 hours.
Likability in women candidates is the you should smile more of politics.
Right.
You know, it's
and
the
don't be
same
so shrill.
statement. You know, like that you're absolutely 1,000% right on this.
But Bernie can yell literally every time he opens his mouth.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And not even to say that everything he's saying is wrong, because it's generally not. But at the same time, like that disparity is ridiculous. And Greg, I don't know if we were on air or not, but like Trump is, you know, clearly, you know, he's the most likable candidate ipso facto.
That's why he won,
right? Because he's so utterly likable. It's a shit argument. Like, I think the you know, conventional wisdoms around this stuff, you know, whether it's electability or likability, it's all garbage, right? It's all things that people in the media and the halls of power tell themselves. Well, that sounds plausible, and then it becomes this thing that's real. But I mean, like, Biden was going to be the candidate 25 minutes ago. He's fucking not. Remember 6 months ago when I said Biden wasn't going to be the candidate? I'm going to fucking tell everyone that over and over and over again. It's going to get annoying, but I was fucking right.
He's going to win South Carolina.
It doesn't matter. You know how many?
Does
You know how many?
that?
Listen to this.
Listen. Wait.
I'll listen to you first because I'm a good
You don't
listener.
think Buttigieg will win because Buttigieg kind of becomes the younger Biden a little bit in terms of DNC perspective.
Yeah.
You don't think that he would take South Carolina? Maybe
The polling all suggests that isn't possible, and we'll see, right? Like we never know.
South Carolina's electorate is African American.
Yeah,
and he's polling in the single digits with African Americans.
He's polling in the I'm a pasty white guy category.
Right.
It's amazing how well Bernie Sanders is doing in that category, which is really interesting.
As we are about Bernie winning the first 3 primaries, Bill Clinton lost the first 5 and lost 6 other ones and was still the nominee. So
the magic can happen, but check this out. You know how many states Biden is spending money in ads for Super Tuesday? 0.
Right.
He's going to lose.
Okay.
He's not going to lose by a little bit. He's going to lose by a lot.
This can go any which way.
It can within a statistical
when the
range.
Republicans had a massive candidates, the leader was Ted Cruz. So
how much money was he spending in Super Tuesday states?
I have no idea, but my point is it's way too early to make like solid predictions of who the nominee is going to be.
Okay, fair enough. Everything that I say is with a caveat that all of this could be wrong.
Right.
Hashtag Year Up Woman. I'm just gonna put that out there.
I want to
be wrong about
ballot
this.
Is sitting on the desk next to me, and I'm not sending it in till after Super Tuesday to see who drops because I want to make sure that I don't preemptively vote for somebody that might drop. But my vote in the primary is for Elizabeth Warren because guess what? She is presidential. And I'm 1000% with Ash on the women have a much more difficult standard to jump, and you don't have to look any further back than Hillary Clinton to see that she wears the pants in the family, she's too much of a man, and then the one time she cried, they went after her for that. So women get double dipped on in this way consistently in the whole world, not just the whole world.
I couldn't agree more. Well, like the one time that she's genuine after they keep telling her to be genuine, I'm like, come on, man, this is bullshit. But that's the biggest issue now. And Obama went through this in the same way. If you're a non-white dude, you have to be better. You don't have to be good enough. You don't have to be a little bit better. You have to be like 2 to 3x better. And that I don't know how to dismantle that except to keep yelling at people that is dumb. But I'm in for that. For the record, Elizabeth Warren is absolutely my first pick right now. Like if I could just magically wave my wand and tyrannically make her president, I would totally do it.
Or vote in a country you're not a citizen of.
That too. I mean, that again, all I can do is yak on the internet, so I do it a lot.
Right.
It's interesting because there's and maybe you guys have floated it before. I'm not sure. I haven't caught every single one of your shows, but
how dare you?
I know. The Veep candidate that I favor floating is Stacey Abrams.
And she's expressed a willingness too. So that's
because if she did it, I think that would be a huge. I mean, look, to me, no matter who the DNC candidate is, you float the idea of bringing Stacey Abrams on as the Veep. That's a huge uptick because she is a hero to Black communities, to brown communities, to white communities. I mean, she's a hero across the board for a lot of people. And so I think that almost no matter who DNC sort of pushes or how the votes go or whatever you want to call it, honestly, you float her as the Veep, Dems win.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a while. Even if it was just on her organizational chops, that would be enough. But when you hear her speak, like I don't know any Democrat that could listen to a Stacey Abrams speech and not come away going like, where do I sign up to volunteer? What the hell? Like it just she's got the juice, really, really does.
Yep, absolutely.
And true. I don't know have you heard her interview with Chris Hayes on the With Pod?
I have not.
Dude, it's so good.
Yes,
it's like
but I haven't listened to it yet. But I did see that it was there. Like it flashed through my.
I can't recommend it more because like I was already a fan. Every 5 minutes, I became 2 times more of a fan. Like that is exponential fan growth. Just because she like all the sort of ticking the boxes as far as like an electoral win or a political win or a governance win, but when it kind of gets to the human side of it, it just like it goes bananas. Like she's just a genuinely
and
really cool human being.
She takes on Pence in a VP debate because there's always a couple of VP debates.
I would pay all
she
the
will
money.
eat him alive.
Yes,
she would eat him alive.
It would be so unfair.
I also think that we're being unrealistic if we think that either Pence or Trump are going to debate any of these candidates.
Well,
I think they're going to.
You know, I do like the fact that Warren comes out and she's like, I don't even think Donald Trump's going to show up. I kind of believe that.
And she should continue to hit that. He'd be terrified too.
Yeah,
but he's the guy lying about a pandemic so the stock market won't tank.
Yeah, he can beat the shit out of her on Twitter and never have to show up anywhere and take any heat himself. That's the cowardly Trumpian thing to do. I think the only reason he debated Clinton is because he bulldozed his he wanted to do that to beat the crap out of her, not for political purposes. Like I think that was his ego talking.
Yep.
And I think that they realized how close they came to losing the presidency over that debate, that I don't think he'll ever do that again. So
did you guys see that Me Too, the head of the Me Too movement, she did a double endorsement for Bernie and Warren?
Yes.
Yep. She was actually on I think she was on Chris Hayes actually talking about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, but I have to say that I thought specifically about this debate last night. I thought it was a shit show, but I think that had to do more with the moderating and the rules enforcement than anything else. It's
why did they have 5 people? Like I don't understand. Why did all of CBS have to be there?
Right. Well, that's
I mean, look, that's also me being a journalist looking at another network and going, "Come on."
Right. Yeah, I don't disagree. I thought that. I posted about this last night. Is it just me or is everybody booing Warren whenever she goes after Bloomberg? Guess why? It turns out seats to that debate were between $1,700 and $3,000.
So bad.
It all was packed with rich people. So I made that face when I read that. I was like, oh, well, that's why people were booing Warren for going after billionaires. Meanwhile, the rest of us were like, yes. And I wanted to talk for a minute about the allegation that she dropped last night, that he had told a woman kill it, and the moderator's like, well, where are you getting this information? From the woman herself. And so now we're right back into that Me Too mode where when women tell me about their experience with sexual harassment and the number of dick pics they receive on their phone, I need to believe them. I need to just straight up believe them. I don't need to get any more verified than that. And that's a lawsuit that's going on and Bloomberg denies it. Okay, great. But it's fair game. If it's out there in public and it's in court, it's the thing that has to get brought up. We have to talk about it. And his record with women, not just his, but the culture of his company, is not good. It's not good at all. And so he needs to be held to account for that. For those.
Look, I'm just of the belief that Bloomberg is Trump, but in a different suit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I really don't see him that much different.
That he has funded, gun control groups nationally. Those.
Hold on, he's one of the biggest funders for Stacey Abrams.
Right, $5 million to Stacey Abrams voting rights.
And does money make up for the fact that you've been a misogynist prick for most of your life?
But let's also go back to stop and frisk. I'm sorry, but this is a huge failure.
I'm not. He's at the bottom of my list. So just so we're clear.
Yeah, like let's put money into Stacey Abrams. What, to make up for stop and frisk? Because even she would call that out.
Maybe, but she took his money, and it was appropriate for her to do so.
And she also defended him recently, saying, "No, look, and I get it. He's backing all political spheres because he's a billionaire and he wants to protect his fortune. That's what you do. So he has paid millions of dollars to Republican candidates and Democratic candidates. It's complicated and it's not, it's not a good look, right? That's the thing. I mean, stop and frisk was a terrible policy. Lots of us knew that before Bloomberg said so, right? But he has said so, and I want to make sure that we leave room for people to move to evolve.
I agree. I'm not saying that I'm anti-evolution. I just feel like we've got someone in there who's going to protect.
If you're anti-evolution, you're
billionaire status and wealth and 1%ers, and that's actually what the rest of America is fighting against. Is the fact that people like the Trumps and the Bloombergs and all these people who have huge amounts of money have been running the show, have been running the shit show. And it's time for that to end. And I think that's the biggest problem for him. And, I want people to be able to evolve. I'm all for true evolution. I think when it comes to things like women's rights and, the rights of our Black and brown brothers and sisters, I don't see sincerity on his part. And unfortunately, that really doesn't suggest to me that he would actually do any good. And he would probably be the Democrat that, if the Dems win, would be the acceptable one for Russia, in my opinion.
Why do you say that?
Because they're going to fish out. Again, look, they work with billionaires and millionaires. Like that's Putin's game. Putin follows the money. You follow the money, you can manipulate anybody.
So
and I just wouldn't put it past someone like Bloomberg to be manipulated in a situation like that.
Okay, yeah, I would like to see some evidence of that, but at the same time, I want to give your argument a little cred. Because, I mean, if he's got any international, no, that's okay. If he's got any international financial exposure, right? Like the second that you have a billionaire with a conflict of interest, I mean, even if
Let's see it.
Right, like that's entirely plausible, and it should be a concern for sure.
Look, I'm not saying Bloomberg is the worst guy in the world. To be honest with you, I'll even look at Trump and say he's not the worst human being that's ever existed either. There's plenty of others. But what I'm saying is because, well, and I say this coming from looking at it from a tribal perspective, right? And right now, the American, sort of the greater American tribe is saying, we don't want these kinds of people in office because it is not helping us, it is not serving us. And so when you have people who are always going to protect their wealth first and foremost and number one, you're always going to have a conflict of interest, which is actually the problem with Trump, really. Like, Russia is less of a problem around Trump, in my opinion, than him just protecting his wealth, his nepotism, his looking out for number one, looking out for financial interests, his ability to make money while he's in office, those kinds of things. For someone like Bloomberg, it's not going to be terribly different in that someone with so much wealth and so much power, especially who has been known for discrimination policies against women and the Black community, it's not going to go over well with him in the White House for this group of people. The other big issue too is Israeli-Palestinian policy, which did come up last night in the debate.
Yeah, what happened? What happened there?
The only person that actually gave a worthy answer was Warren. The only person, not even Bernie's answer. So she basically talked about the fact that she feels that America's job is not to be in charge of the negotiation. America's job is to simply just get them to the table so that there can be a negotiation in the first place. In other words, host rather than actually, create a plan.
Right,
drive it, which is exactly what's happening now. Is the U.S. is driving it. Kushner's driving it, and the U.S. has driven it. Well, he's telling Palestinians what to do, right?
Yeah.
The Jewish boys telling them.
Kushner driving anything is just terrifying and sad.
Fair enough. But she was the only one who kind of said, look, our job is to get them to the table. And she goes, that's it. That's where we should put our focus. Bloomberg thinks that they should keep the embassy, continue to keep it in Jerusalem. Bernie kind of refused to answer the question. Warren went over it a little bit, but I think what she did is she gave the best answer as far as, let's look at this as an issue that we can be there as allies, not be there as their quote unquote money support. That is something that Bernie sort of recognizes as well, which is why you actually have a lot of Palestinians and Tlaib who support him. But at the end of the day, I still continued to see all these candidates not quite get it, right? The two-state solution is dead, and it's been dead for a very long time. And now what Palestinians are fighting for essentially is a one-state solution where they get full democratic rights, which they don't get
that seems pretty
with the system that currently exists.
Right.
No, and I'm not saying that it's likely to happen. What I'm saying is that until you understand what the Palestinians are asking for, you don't even have a base to create a peace negotiation talk, and they don't even get that part yet.
So why do you think the two-state solution is dead, and why do you think that these candidates aren't recognizing it?
Because here's the thing: the two-state solution would require complete eradication of the illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. A true two-state solution means they have to go.
And there's basically no way to make that happen.
You have to allow for the right of return for all of the Palestinians who are outside the country, who've been exiled over the course of many wars, to be able to come back into that territory that you proclaim as quote-unquote Palestine. So a two-state solution would require going back to 1967 sort of semi-agreed borders and creating sort of a Palestinian state, and it would require some sort of connection between Gaza and occupied territory, which are right now separated. None of those things are going to happen, and the Israelis are not going to give any of that up.
Right. How many
So the
settlers
two-state
are there
solution
now?
is dead.
You know, it's a big
There's
big number.
several 100,000. I'm not sure how many settlements. I think there might be a couple hundred settlements. Please don't quote me on that, but I'd have to look it up. But there's several 100,000 illegal settlers in the occupied West Bank, and I believe that somewhere around 300,000 to 400,000 of those are dual passport American Jewish.
So there's just no way that we're going to be able to pressure those folks to go back where they came from. It just doesn't seem like that's a thing that's likely.
So that's why I say the two-state solution is dead. That's why most Palestinians believe it, and that's why their fight is more about having an equal democratic opportunity to be represented and freedom that does not include being tried under Israeli martial law, which is, again, part of sort of their Jim Crow apartheid system.
Of all countries.
So that's the thing is that Israel has been kind of absorbed into our domestic policy because we give so much money to it, even though it's technically a foreign policy. And I think that's one of the things that was missing. The other big international question that was asked last night was Syria. And again, Warren gave the best answer. Buttigieg was close. But I think Warren still gave a better answer because she pushed diplomacy. Like, we need to get aid. We need to get aid in. There needs to be a full-on truce. We need to be able to get people help. These are the kinds of things that she was talking about, which, again, women tend to lean in toward things like aid and diplomacy more than their male counterparts, even in the Democratic Party.
Right.
And that's what she leaned in on the answer. Buttigieg and some of the male respondents are going to look at, like, oh, we need to have kind of this military plan and we need to kind of get back that way, and they try to create this sort of dynamic, but it's a war dynamic, and she's saying no, stop. Jeremy recently from Preemptive Love Coalition, he had like a video, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and the number one thing he said, this is when I think some of the Iran stuff was going on, he said somebody has to pull their finger off the trigger. So it's got to stop. Like, the violence has to stop.
Yeah.
Right.
Mom, did you mean Clyburn?
Yeah, Clyburn endorsed Biden this morning.
That's
a big deal.
Non-trivial. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why he's gonna win He's gonna win South Carolina. His
the last poll actually has him 8.5 points above Sanders.
Yep.
But I mean, Sanders
I can't believe that the Biden campaign put all of their eggs in the South Carolina basket, because it's not a huge state, and it gives you a little fundraising momentum, but not enough to staff up 10 other states.
Well, and then
go hard in those states.
The entire messaging, like, so what Sanders did in Nevada and freaked everybody out with the Hispanic vote, I'm deeply fascinated with. Texas. Because that's exactly where my head went.
Arizona,
right? Like, if they, that's the way to actually. Well, that's exactly where I was taking this. So Sanders is 30% in California, and everybody else has like 10.
Right.
So he's gonna win by far the most delegates in one of the states, if not the state with the most delegates.
Right.
So it's something has to dramatically change to change this race at this point, I think.
Yeah, his statements about Castro and Cuba are problematic with Florida Hispanics, and not really elsewhere, right?
Where are Florida Hispanics leaning? Do you guys know?
Say again.
Let me find out.
What's that? I didn't hear the question.
Where Florida Hispanics are leaning?
Well,
per state polls.
Yeah, I actually don't have any current polling, but historically, Hispanics in Florida are more conservative than they are in other states politically. They tend to be more likely to vote Republican.
Oh, wow.
Or moderate than they are in other states.
Bloomberg is currently in the lead
with the political power of Cubans in South Florida, and it's not just Cubans. There are a lot of Venezuelans there now who have had bad experience with the far left, totalitarian regime. But the thing about it is, I want to read a quote. Let me find it. I'm going to read a quote, and this is problematic for Bernie. Occasionally, it might be a good idea to be honest about American. That is the actual quote. Here it is. I was going to play a trick on you guys, and I totally blew it. Essentially, what I really want to say about this is that what the things that Bernie said about Cuba the other day are in no way different from what Obama has said about Cuba and about Fidel Castro in the last 8 years. you know, and he was called a socialist for saying them. So, you know, whatever, you know, and the idea that, oh, the literacy program was just a way to propagandize kids, like ours is any different. You know, calling slaves workers in textbooks. You don't think that was a little propaganda to teach our kids to read? Come on, man. The truth is that Cuba exports doctors and medicine all over the rest of Latin America because they have a really good medical education system for healthcare workers. They just do. And saying that that's not true is dishonest. The other thing is, Bernie, I rewatched it this morning. Don had to suffer through me watching his 60 Minutes interview with Anderson Cooper again, because, you know, he said we are not in favor of totalitarian regimes. You know, we have problems with the Castro totalitarian government, but so he bracketed everything he said with disapproval of how Cuba has treated their people for 50 years now. Also, Castro not in power anymore. Can we move on? You know, we were on our way to restore.
I think what happens though is that
Cuba, and we're not.
Yeah.
Many times
I think that just it goes to tribal thinking, and it goes to, you know, I mean, this is something I talk about all the time, and that is, you know, we the way that we teach dominion, right, especially white colonial dominion, is that if one aspect is bad, it's all bad. Right. And we don't really look at, you know, maybe the more redeeming aspects of it, all the while we're trying to do the exact same thing, right? Yeah. And that is the mentality of having dominion over, rather than being able to recognize, you know, the system as it is within the human condition. You know, I mean, this is just another brief example. I've been watching the Malcolm X documentary, and, you know, I mean, as I've gotten older as an adult, you know, I'm far more educated now about, you know, sort of Malcolm and the role he played for the desperation, you know, during the civil rights movement. But growing up as a kid, you learn Malcolm bad, King good as a white person.
Right.
And so what happens is that there's this blanketed message to paint whatever they think is bad, and sort of forget the rest. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that, you know, a lot of the sort of militancy that came from the followers of Malcolm or the Nation of Islam or the Black Power movement came with a sense of desperation to protect their own communities. And a lot of the Black Power movement, you know, they were actually supplying food and jobs. I mean, they were taking care of their communities. There will always be factions. Yeah, absolutely. So when you go back to whether it's the Cuba thing or whatever, even people of the same race or the same tribe will turn on each other when they need to find something to create dominion over the other person, rather than really listening and understanding, you know, that the other one is probably just marrying them back on some level. And so I think that's the thing is that, yes, Cuba has created some incredible systems. Does that mean that what Castro did and his brother and so forth have done as far as the totalitarian government? No, that's still wrong. That's still not okay. But, you know, we can't wash away the areas that may have worked for the Cuban people who stayed. And I think that, but I think, again, I think that goes to just colonial thinking. And I also think that just goes to, again, dominion thinking rather than, you know, sort of participation thinking.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And like, I don't want to, I also, you know, this idea that these are radical far left ideas, you know, who advocated for universal basic income in the 60s? Martin Luther King. You know, who advocated for universal health care in the 60s? John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. These are not far left radicals, although, you know, Martin Luther King was painted as a communist agitator for demanding civil rights.
Registered as a Republican.
Right. And white folks want to, you know, use one part of a quote by Martin Luther King about, you know, peaceful and doing things right. But they forget the other part where he said a riot is the voice of the unheard. Yeah. Right. So when we have when we have what are called race riots, where a community rises up and gets angry and throws cops at authority, or throws rocks at authority figures like cops, that's because they feel so desperately unheard. And that goes back to what you were saying about Malcolm X, that, you know, that was desperation. Desperation makes that happen. And my entire, you know, lecture point to the few conservatives that I have conversations with is, look, man, I'm just trying to keep you from getting your head lopped off, because when income equality gets bad enough and enough people who are poor are dying because they can't have access to jobs or healthcare or you know, sustenance living or housing, they're going to come over the wall into your gated community and bad things are going to happen. Would you really, are you comfortable enough that you feel like that's okay? That's you should be thinking about that. Not advocating.
Well, and I would encourage anybody to. I actually recently, it's a 2019 movie, but it was called the Hate You Give, and it's sort of based around like Tupac's thug life, but like the young woman in it, she goes to a all white school, and yet one night she sees one of her best friends, a black kid, get shot by a cop, right? And so then she has to make a decision about like how to stand for her friend. Right. And you see her go through this stage where she gets so desperate that she finally like shows up at a protest, gets on the bullhorn, says her piece, and then when tear gas is thrown, she gets so angry she picks it up and throws it back. Like, she's so angry. And that's the thing is that when we begin to understand that violence comes from actually it doesn't come from hatred, it comes from desperation, then I think that we can begin to start to humble ourselves, to find those places of unity, and to find those places where we can sort of go humbly before each other and start to understand that we actually have way more in common. It is one of the reasons why I like Warren in this race, because one of the things that Warren has done is she's had conservatives who've showed up at her rallies, and they ask her these questions about, well, what would you say if I told you this, that, and the other thing? And so the first thing she does is she tries to direct it towards something they might have in common, rather than how they approach it differently. And she lets them know that she respects the differences and that she honors the differences. And when we can get to a point where we're willing to have those kinds of conversations with people in the room that are different than us, then we can actually come together and realize how the current government, for example, is not serving us, and how a change could serve us if we can band together over our similarities. And there's plenty of that in the United States, I think, to be had. And so anyway, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I just think that, like, when the Cuba comment doesn't bother me, because I think people need to realize that it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with Cuba at all, in my opinion.
Right. So I want to pick out a particular comment from Donna Arbogast. Greg, think like the lowest common denominator, i.e. borderline Trump supporter. It looks bad if you don't know the full story. Okay, but that person is lost to us, and that's fine, especially in Florida. Like this week, the Florida Democratic Party announced for the first time in state history there are more than 5 million registered Democrats in the state of Florida. That's about 350,000 more voters than the Republican Party has. So if all of the Democrats and 35% of the independents vote our way, we don't need that borderline Trump supporter. We don't need that person that isn't invested enough to learn the full story. We can do without them. No, I'm not scared by that. I'm really not scared by that. And having had conversation with lots of Trump supporters that are far less informed, I have trouble thinking like that lowest common denominator voter, because shit's on fire and you should be paying attention. Voting against your own self-interest is a thing, and poor folks do it all the time. I posted a meme this morning of Fry from what's the animated show, Fry. Anyway, Fry, what are you doing? You're not a wealthy person. Well, I might be wealthy someday, and when I am, people like me should look out.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
I just can't imagine.
But that's the thing, though, Greg. I mean, like liberation has to come within. Like, people's freedom and awareness and awakeness has to come from within them first. And if it doesn't, they're not going to see.
Hey, Carrie DeLoff is joining us from Holland this morning live. That's nice to see you in our thread. Carrie. Nice to see you in here. I like how Warren is open to listening and adapting ideas. I don't like when people call that flip-flopping. I have to agree with that. We're never going to get Republican voters. They're just they're lost to us.
Like 98 million% approval rating for what history will remember as the worst president in the history of mankind, except maybe Hitler.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't a president, to be fair. But
fair enough. To be fair. Watch Letterkenny. Just do it. That way, all of our jokes will make sense. All right. So
Futurama. Jeez, I don't know why I couldn't get that show out of my face. Thank you, Jareen. Appreciate that.
Indeed.
So what else?
I want to let everyone know in the United States, because I'm living in Asia, y'all can calm down about Corona.
Yeah.
You think so?
Calm the fuck down.
Why?
Look, first of all, there are 7.7 billion people in the world. There have been something like 8,000 cases, and the death rate is only something like 2%.
Right.
This is very, very, very small number. And someone I saw a story in Italy the other day, and a woman, she said in the story, it was an Al Jazeera story, she said paranoia is more contagious than the disease itself.
No, that's definitely true.
And that's definitely true. And so I am for concerns, yeah, of course, there has to be concerns. We have to, kind of think about those things because there isn't a vaccine for it now. I have read in several places that the root of this initially was a market where black market animals were brought in. So animals that would theoretically be, quote, illegal to hunt and eat were brought in, and this would have potentially been something that one of those would have been carrying.
Interesting.
They would have brought it to a market in Wuhan. I saw a few sources that suggested this. So, of course, this I think then goes to, a whole lot of other environmental issues and illegal poaching and things like that. But essentially, this is where it's thought to have been started. In Malaysia, for example, they've only had something like 10 cases. They were all along the Singapore-Malaysian border, and they were actually treating it with a drug that is typically used for HIV, and it seemed to be working. Now, that may not be the case across the board, but that was what the local news was reporting on this side. Singapore has had some struggles with it because they get a lot of influx from China because they're a huge international airport. And there have been cases in Iran that the cases in Iran ended up being what made it to Italy. So, there's definitely a lot of precautions that are being taken, and I'm not against those precautions. I do feel like the hysteria in the media has been
Hold on with the hysteria thing.
Yeah.
I definitely want us to be responsible. But I think you're very provably wrong about that. And the reason I say that is the number of cases that are coming out of China right now, per reported, it's pretty well understood that they're underreporting and that they were underreporting for a long time. If you look at the countries directly around China where there's very few cases, they're also not looking for it. Italy actually said the only reason why they found 200 cases is because they looked. Right? So this could already be everywhere. And you're right. The death toll is 2%. 2% of the population of the earth is fucking massive.
And 2%, a 2% death rate is a lot higher.
It's 20 times higher than the flu. And again, we need to be responsible about this. I don't want to add to any hysteria, but one of the things that the president did, for example, the what's left of the CDC, and then the State Department did, is everybody that was on that boat in, I think it was off Japan. They basically, left them there for 5 days on this boat that was full of, if I'm not mistaken, hundreds of people that were infected.
It was longer than that too. Yeah.
Okay. And it was only because one of them knew a congressman that they actually got them out. And what they did is they put them on buses, and then they realized they put them on buses where 14 people were known to have the virus, and they put them all on these buses together because they're utterly incompetent. The CDC told them not to do it, and the State Department did it anyway because the State Department listens to the orange fucking McGee. Right? Like the idea that this is under control is vastly overstated.
Yeah, actually,
it's really
not suggesting that every country is or the U.S. is necessarily approaching this correctly. Unfortunately, though, what's happening is we're seeing a rise in racism. We're seeing a rise in
that's going to be a problem, and that's going to get worse.
The problem is there's not as much of an effort, I think, in a lot of the media reports that I've watched to really break it down. And I think that's the problem. I actually had someone who called me, I guess last night or this morning for me, who is in Europe, far from it, freaking out and wondering how they should deal with it. And my response to her was, first of all, take a deep breath. There are no cases in your country.
Well, honestly, that's probably not true now. There's 12 in the United States right now.
There's no known cases where they are. And you know, the other part is you can't necessarily run around in fear. Now, here in Malaysia and Singapore, they'll go out with masks. Okay, that's reasonable. The pollution, they're going out with masks anyway. Fine, that's reasonable. No, nobody needs to be coughing on anybody or hacking on anybody or things like that. But I also think that, and when you go to the airports around in Asia, which I've flown around in the region a little bit in the last couple of months, and you know, you arrive in a country and they typically have like a form you have to fill out, and a health official who, you know, is kind of checking for things, and then they have a quarantine area. But I also met a Chinese girl the other day who said that when she arrived here, her village had been cleared by the Chinese government. She had already been tested and everything in China, but she arrived here and she still had to sit in some quarantine random building for 2 weeks. And then before she leaves the country, she has to sit in it again for 3.
Can I say something?
Come on.
Can I say something that might be like really hard to hear? That's smart. And I know it's not cool, but here's the thing. The head doctor at the CDC basically said that it's not if, it's when this is going to be hit in the United States to the point where schools are going to have to start considering segregating classrooms. And corporations, companies with more than a handful of employees should really consider doing teleconferencing in if they at all can.
The CDC needs to start fucking getting on a solution to the problem.
Well, honestly, they would be if they would be if they were funded, right? Like the first thing that Obama did after the Obama, and I'm getting all of this, and Rachel did an entire hour on this last night, which is the only reason why I know any of this stuff. I highly recommend you listen to it that way. It's not coming from me; it's coming from smarter people than me by far. But yeah, the first thing that Trump did was take anything that Obama did in the CDC or anything related to it and killed it. And what Obama had done was created basically an organizational structure to deal with Ebola in other countries, right? And so all this stuff was set up, all this stuff was ready, and he literally defunded and fired everyone. And now we're like, cool, well, let's try and catch up. And the second that the CDC had an opportunity to actually make a decision around bringing those people home, the State Department countermanded it, and they brought like a fucking 200 people home on a plane, and 14 of them were infected.
The CDC
in the plane
said the day yesterday.
I'm not saying that there's not room for concern. I'm just telling people don't walk around in fear.
And that's a really good advice. But we also shouldn't say that it's nothing, because it's probably not.
I don't think that it's nothing. I think that, you know, that unfortunately, I often see this happen even among the networks and all of this, where it's blown up to be, you know, something that does actually end up getting solved. People thought Ebola, I mean, look, Ebola was dangerous, but Ebola got nipped in the bud pretty damn quick because people mobilized globally to get it done.
Agreed.
And the thing is, what's happening is that, you know, don't create the hysteria, break it down and explain it to people so that they feel like they can connect to it and to take common sense precautions for themselves and within their communities to tighten it up so you don't have segregation and you don't have this issue of you know, racism and these social issues that are that's what it's going to turn into. That is exactly what it's going to turn into.
And I'm absolutely sensitive to that.
There's a way to avoid that.
Well, and I every time that I talk about this in the future, I definitely want to bring that up because you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things people are worried about now with the cases in Iran, if that gets into the populations in Syria that are already underfed, that are already at risk for disease anyway, the first thing that's going to happen is everyone's going to want to put walls up and close their borders because we definitely can't let those brown people in. You know, like it'll just ramp up all the worst parts of humanity anyway. Up to a really, really high degree, which will be, I mean, well, I was going to say unfortunate, but deeply fucking tragic is more like it. So I want to make sure that we're as balanced as humanly possible about that. But yeah, I mean that stuff last night got my attention. I've been watching it for a while. Like you don't want to ever add to the hysteria.
And I'm not necessarily saying that you're not wrong. All I'm saying is that what I feel like I have seen has been a lot of things that sort of get blown up into fear to the point where like people don't function, and then the problem really doesn't get solved because they're running around like a bunch of chickens with their head cut off.
Well, okay,
and I'm saying let's break this down and work it through.
With Trump's spokesman and task force members yesterday directly contradicting the actual experts at the CDC on how serious this was. That's a problem. Like downplaying it for whatever reason is there's a balance, right? There's too much concern and there's not enough concern, and everything is fine. We'll have it contained by March. There's a vaccine. No, there is not a vaccine, and we're maybe 11 or 12 months away from having an effective vaccine. So, look, if this is there are 700 and something vacancies at the CDC right now. They've gutted it, and like this is one,
which is a bit surprising because he's a bit of a germaphobe. So,
but no, and if you go back to 2015, he was telling everyone that Ebola was going to crash the economy, right? And so the second that there's a possibility of a pandemic, he sees a little shudder in the markets. It was actually really big. He comes out the next day and fucking lies about it because he knows this will kill his presidency. Yeah. Like the market is a giant bubble. Everyone with half a brain knows it. And this is very, very likely the black swan event that takes the market down by 30% and destroys Donald Trump. And he knows this. So instead of saving 2% of the world's population, he comes out and says, no, everything's fine. There's a cure. We're good. And it's dog shit.
Well,
if people sleep on this,
a dictator does. Yeah,
right. If people sleep on this, people will die. The guy they're calling the hero, who's the whistleblower in China, because China was, of course, completely trying to cover this up, was a fucking ophthalmologist.
Right.
He was an eye doctor, and he's dead now.
I want to make sure that I say that this is one aspect of the hugest problem with the Trump presidency is not just the CDC. They have gutted every agency that oversees from food sources to pollution to nuclear waste storage to mining. Gutting the agencies that are responsible for keeping us safe puts us at risk. Not just I mean. This is a problem with the whole nature of this presidency, not just on this one issue. But this goes back to an environmental thing. Like, I mean, everything from health. Like, I associate environmental issues with health, right? Because like you take care of the earth, you take care of your health, you take care of health, you take care of the environment. Like, to me, they're interchangeable. As far as issues that I think need to have attention, and that's the thing is I go back to the reports. Examined that the suspicion is that it came from like game animals that shouldn't be shot. So 2 things there. We might not be able to put a whole lot of focus right now on the legality or illegality of those things, but if you go back to those animals, it'd be worth like testing them so that you could look at, how do you treat it? How do you get to it? How do you reverse this? And then secondly, there's drugs in Malaysia and Singapore that are being used right now that are at least working. Are they the cure? Are they going to, are they going to work across the board? Who knows? But they are working, so there needs to maybe be more education sort of geared toward the cases of recovery so that we can figure out exactly how to stop it.
Right.
To me, that's part of the breakdown. I also, I just think that it's
clicking on your necklace. Can
your religion is creating a lot of static right now.
There you go.
It's a feminist religion, guys.
Look, but
that was a joke.
It's a woman on a tree.
Oh, is it? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a woman on a tree of life. Yeah.
It was a horrible joke, and I apologize.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
The point being is that I think there just needs to be more fleshing out, and then drive home our need to prevent things like this in the future, which means then paying attention to environmental concerns, which includes everything from animals to plants to everything else that we need to. I mean, the fact that I was reading the last few days about Trump's administration just because he's rolled back pretty much everything Obama did. There has been an all-time record low of environmental violations being prosecuted. And there's been, so much rollback on everything from oil to parks to pipelines, like all of those kinds of things that ultimately support his own son's game hunting. Let's not forget that his son's game hunt.
Yeah. And
that this disease right now is believed to stem from game that's not supposed to be killed and sold. So it ties into all of these issues. If we don't want pandemics like this in the future to be able to take place, then we have to also start going towards some of their causes, and we have to start explaining what those are and taking time to invest in those things as issues from kind of a socio-ecological political perspective.
Right.
Because that, unfortunately, what happens is a pandemic happens, everyone's going to get quarantined, the world is going to end tomorrow. Wait. What caused it? What are the ways that it's getting treated? What do we need to do to prepare for it? And politically, who do we rope in to get this done? And maybe Matt outdid that.
Administration is going to take
maybe Matt outdid that, but we need more of that.
Yeah, but I love that framing, because that is the responsible way to talk about it. Of course, in the United States, that ends up with like, oh, we're all going to die because Donald Trump is president. Slightly hyperbolic, but there are amazing people still at the CDC. There's going to be amazing people at the state level. There, I would imagine that there will be a ground up military response. There's actually a military member of the United States Army in South Korea that is infected now, right? So, I mean, but there's going to be a lot of people responding from the ground up that probably won't wait for messages from on high, because they're probably figuring out by now that they're not going to come.
I want to go back for a minute to the vector question about wild animals, and like going back to look at both Ebola and HIV. The source seems to have been bushmeat, and I want to talk about poaching in that context for a minute. That the vast majority of poaching in third world countries has nothing to do with making money from tusks or gorilla hands. It's bushmeat. It's people that are killing animals because they do not have access to food, and lecturing them about the morality of hunting when they're starving is sort of a fool's errand and not really productive. So if I understand that the animals in question in Wuhan were maybe not like endangered game animals, but just food source animals that are outside of normal control. So that is something to think about, right? But it's also an opportunity for racists to vilify poor people, third world people, especially brown people in African and Asian countries. So we want to be careful about that, but at the same time, like when you were just saying, we need to look at the root cause, what's stemming, does all this begin? Poverty. And our inability to reach countries in a positive way and help them develop systems that aren't so susceptible. Like the country in Africa for decades that had the highest HIV transmission rate was Botswana, not because there was a lot of bushmeat hunting. It's actually, I don't want to call it a wealthy country, but the standard of living in Botswana is better than most of the countries around it. It just happens that the narrow strip of eastern Botswana, I'm sorry, is where the railroads are that go from the rest of Africa to South Africa, and the amount of industrial train traffic through Botswana is why it became such a vector. They've reduced that number greatly. How? By getting past the argument, the missionary and church-based argument that condoms were against God's law, right? Having to overcome that religious underpinning for why people weren't having protected sex is what allowed them to start turning the corner on their war on HIV. So there's room for us to do this in a secular way, in a government assistance way that isn't preachy. And I don't just mean necessarily religiously preachy. There are countries in Africa that manage their game animals for hunting and feed people on that revenue. Right?
And I'm not suggesting that we preach to anybody about their hunting habits, especially if it's a food source or a delicacy or anything like that. But what I'm saying is that, and the Chinese government is probably going to swoop in and put a whole bunch of regulations on it. But I think what has to happen is we have to have an appropriate conversation about how do we limit or what kind of regulations we do put on those things, whether it's in our own country in the West or whether it's in, and again, the Chinese government is all about saving face. So that there is going to be sort of an attack probably on, trying to figure out how they can limit that, which may end up actually hurting some people. But I think that as a global conversation, we need to begin to have the conversations about what to do with that kind of stuff. How do we, the United States, it might not be a gaming issue that we need to talk about. We need to talk about healthcare in a different way. We need to talk about food in a different way. I'm a vegan. I don't judge people who eat meat though. You eat meat, I understand millions of years of evolution, like people eat meat, like the bodies are made for it. Got it. Circle of life, it's completely fine. But it's a matter of how do we have a relationship with our food? What is the relationship we have with the land? And what are the regulations around things like growth? And what are the, where do the regulations and deregulations need to happen so that we can have the healthiest source, so things like this don't happen? So that things diseases can be tested for, so that things like that. I'm of the belief that there's too many regulations in the West on the soil, to the point where, like, you can't even have worms growing in some of your dirt in some states, and so we might need to, there needs to be adjustments for that, but then there might need to be more regulations in other places when it concerns maybe certain hunting rules or whatever, for the sake of the fact that we have to create some sort of relationship with food in our modern world where factory food and technology has taken away the quality of what the land gives us. And it is our relationship with the land and our relationship with what goes into our body that ultimately makes all of the difference as it concerns our ability to do things like prevent diseases, as it concerns being able to lift up poverty, and as it concerns being able to make sure that people aren't living in the squalor that they shouldn't have to live in. And that's a global that's a global issue, that's a global problem. And so to me it goes back to conversations about how do we regulate or deregulate the land and the animals accordingly, so that we can prevent these things in the future, and so that we can also come up with treatments, so that we can come up with medicines, so that we can come up with smart ways to contain it without it going into all of this insanity.
Yeah, couple things on that. Just having looked up some stuff, there is actually already a vaccine test going into trials.
Okay, good. Yeah, I saw that somewhere, but
so that's the real thing. And again, we'll see how that goes. I don't know how long the trials are, but I imagine, like, if this thing goes pandemic crazy, that's going to be interesting. They are testing an antiviral drug that they actually created for Ebola on one of the patients that came back from Japan. So that's happening. It's had good results in animals, but again, hasn't been tested on a human before. Obviously, they're skipping the trials and just going straight to fuck it, let's try it out, which I don't blame them. And it's interesting. So that you can look up Moderna is working with the NIH on the initial vaccine. And it's because of how much faster they can now track the genetic profile for these diseases that this is even possible. They started working on it the second that China released the genetic profile for the disease. Again, like 5 years ago, before you could sequence a genome in less than 18 years, right? So like that level of technology, I think, is something that is already going to have a major impact on how much these things affect the population as a whole, and that's probably going to get exponentially better, right? As far as tamping down the crazy. So real things are actually happening on it that could end up being really, really good. But I still think it's worth actually watching, because I think like in most of the places where cases are being reported, I mean, in Wuhan, they're building 20 new hospitals right now, but there's not that many more cases being reported in Wuhan, right? Like and it's on martial law and then. Right. So I just want us to be evidence based, because we were having a conversation before too, where I won't say any names, but it rhymes with Maeve Hires. Had a theory about the fact that it was like some crazy thing coming from the States or whatever, and he did some more research, and we're ruthlessly data driven, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't. So we're but he went and did his homework on that, and came to a good conclusion. Like we definitely have to be data driven. We got to be smart about it. We definitely can't get hysterical and can't add to any of that. And wherever we can, even if it's just hopefully speaking up for people, there will be people that are the most vulnerable on the planet that get vilified for this nonsense, and we have to push back on that ruthlessly, because it's not their fault, and it's nothing to do with them.
Yeah, a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, we would love for you to, if you have not, to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube feed. We have 23 concurrent watchers right now, which is pretty good. We haven't been getting that many day to day. So
let's call that the record. Remember on Coffee in the Dock when we used to do the record all the time?
Let's call that the Ash Gallagher factor.
It's the bump, right? That's what it is, 100%.
But we'd love for you to share this back to social media so other people find us and will subscribe as well. Our goal is to get to 1,000 followers on the YouTube channel so we can monetize it and stuff like that there.
Until I actually had somebody comment asking how to support the show, which I thought was super sweet. Right now you can go to solocal.live/donate to give us a tip or to subscribe monthly. Right now all of that goes to just paying for all the tech that we use to make this going on. But we're getting to the point where if a few more people subscribe, we could actually buy Greg and I a coffee each every month. So that's pretty cool. So we drink a lot of coffee.
But the other thing that I want to do is I'm going to drop a link in here in the comments for Ash Gallagher's book, and
yes.
you should actually go and click that link immediately. It is her Mosul memoir project, Reckoning in the Rubble, about her time as a war correspondent in some pretty sketchy parts of the world. We admire her bravery and her work a whole lot. She's writing the book now. She's where are you in the process there, Ash?
Well, I'll go through a couple of things here too, because I was going to jump in a little bit. I am in the production stage of this, so that means that I am going to be doing self-publication, which is I'm going to be doing my own layout, and to set up for both an ebook and potentially a paperback release. I'm kind of looking at a couple of different programs for that now. I'm trying to be a little more socially conscious than Amazon, and so there's a couple of websites that I'm examining now that I'm doing the research on to see how much they would cost to be able to basically do your own layout and then you can publish and sell it through them. And then it also means paying a cover artist to do the cover work. And so this is the production stage. I have not announced a release date yet. I am hoping to very soon because I want it to be a spring release date. But I want to make sure that I can kind of get everything organized before I do that, so I kind of know what the timeline and the outlook is. But this is sort of the final stage. This is the stage of kind of putting it together into a product. But it takes time. This has been a self-funded effort, but it's been very rewarding. And so yeah, I would love for you guys' support on that. I do want to throw in there that this week, and I will put a link in the comment section, I am doing something on Patreon. Every single day this week, I've been posting new content. I had the privilege of interacting with plant medicine a year ago, in particular ayahuasca. And I wrote about my experience, and there's actually a clip from one of my soul sisters who was there with me. I did kind of a mini podcast where I recorded some of our conversation the other day, so you get to hear us kind of talking about it. I put up some poetry that came afterwards. Today I'm going to be interviewing Travis actually this week as well, so there'll be a post there. And so every day this week there's a post, and then Saturday I'm going to do like a video, kind of a live stream thing. It's $5.50. So it's the equivalent of a Starbucks. Right. So jump on there, and for every 100 people, I will randomly pick 4 people to interview, and you guys will go toward future podcasts, and you get a chance to tell me your story, and I'll kind of work up one on you. So I would love for you guys to join that this week. Nice. Some of the content I may take down once the week is finished to kind of make room for some other things, but I'm going to keep on a bit of this environmental, sort of socio-political side. Tomorrow I'm actually planning an essay that'll look at a little bit about the kind of ecological justice and sort of connection to Earth and why it matters in sort of the political world and how we connect to it. Some of the stuff that I've kind of thrown in there tonight will expand on tomorrow. And so I would love for you guys to be part of that as well.
Absolutely.
I want to break in here, Greg, if I could. Yep. Sorry. Because I want to add as much weight to what she's doing as humanly possible. The guy she's interviewing, Travis, close personal friend of mine, who of course Greg introduced me to, because Greg has introduced me to almost all
Great
the cool
Spirit
people
Farm in Brooksville
that I know. Yep. I have also had experience with this particular plant medicine. It is probably among the 2 or 3 most important things that I've ever experienced in my entire life. I cannot possibly oversell hopping on Ash's Patreon to get as much information around this as humanly possible, because this plant medicine, especially the way that I am absolutely sure Ash is going to be able to discuss it, definitely the price of admission is absolutely worth it just to hear Travis on this. I call him Master T for a reason. It is probably the biggest single thing that could change the fucking planet, and that is not hyperbole. That's probably just statistically real. So please do it.
Also, I wanted to ask Ash, when you interview Travis, ask him about the over-harvesting issue, because this is something I've been hearing about for the last few weeks, that there are concerns about people over-harvesting that particular plant, and it may be in danger. Now, I don't know how cultivatable or how easy it is to grow, but it would seem to me that there ought to be a movement to preserve the plant or two plants that are necessary for the medicine that's being discussed.
I'm curious about it too, because after the fires in the Amazon, because it is indigenous to South America, and certainly the shamans and medicine men and women that do it in places like Asia and other parts of the world are usually getting it kind of through sort of a weave of sources. But I'm kind of curious as well about kind of what's where so I do want to kind of jump into with him a little bit about sort of the ecological aspects of it,
Right.
as well, to kind of help educate people about it, but at least right now, like you guys, there's a full 2,000 word essay on my experience that I share. Like I said, I put up some today. The Wednesday was kind of the easier day, midweek poetry, so I put up some poetry that I had written afterwards, and then there's also a kind of a mini podcast with one of my soul sisters who was there with me, and you get to hear kind of her perspective on things from that night. And so we've got a lot of really, really just amazing content, and I would just love for you guys to join. I really had a very unique journey. Obviously Corey has attested it to his, and mine was definitely something that I needed for me, which is what it's about. And so definitely, yeah, come check it out, join it, make it kind of a community thing.
Here's another interesting thing, just sort of between the three of us.
Yeah.
Well, and now everybody who's watching, but I have a set of recordings that Corey made on the day after his first experience with this, and with other people, and so other people were talking about how it affected them. That might be interesting for future discussion. But of course, we'd have to talk to the other people in those recordings, make sure that they're cool with sharing them. But
at most, that would be like a very closed.
Yeah, I could message all of those people,
for sure.
Like the next 5 minutes, because I know them very well. So
Oh yeah, my journal, I didn't have the ability, the next day when I left and kind of went to this little place on the ocean that I went and stayed for a couple days on my own. I didn't have the ability to even write at that point, so I took my voice recorder, and my journal entry from that day is my voice recording. I've since transcribed it and everything, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing though too, is even my soul sister that I interview, I don't ever say her name.
Right.
I never share her name. It's just her voice. And I took a snippet from our conversation a year later to kind of and she knew, she knew it, I told her that I would, and she was fine with it. But we kind of just gave a little bit of a perspective, because she had an entirely different her experience. She had an experience where she sort of felt the high, but didn't really feel like she was really going deep. And then the next day, the day after, everything sort of started moving for her in a very different way. And she got the experience that she needed to have through that. Nice. So, I think that's the thing is it becomes very personal, because it works with your body, and it works with your mind, and it works within you, whatever your belief system is. It doesn't matter whether you're a religious person or an energy person or a science person. It is something that definitely has an effect on your body, especially when you bring it from a ceremonial space.
Beautiful stuff.
Amen.
We love sharing our show with you. Hey, the Dow is up 339. So
yeah,
there's that. But of course, the president hasn't spoken yet today.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we're clear that the coronavirus is not causing the stock market to tumble. It's Corey explained pretty well yesterday, a black swan event, which is a factor that was almost a tipping point or a last straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. So having it characterized as a response to the coronavirus, it affected the travel sector and airlines and some other things yesterday. But that's not the whole story behind the stock market. The stock market has been on a meth-fueled sugar high for far too long, and it was likely to come down anyway. So this is, by the way, this is all stuff that Corey's been predicting for the last year. That no, this is not healthy. So
when you're a bubble this big and this thin, any pin will pop it.
Yep. All right, are we ready to wrap this up? It's 10 after 11. We did a full hour this morning, a little over an hour. That's always good to stretch our legs and have a long show. So we're back on Friday morning, of course, with another hashtag coffee show. And Ash, you are, all that has to happen is Ash sends up a flare and we bring her on the show, because we always enjoy sharing our time with Ash, because she's far smarter than we are about.
And cynically, we get the bump. I mean, 23 is the new record. That's I mean, that's a real thing.
Yep.
I'm happy to give you guys some bumps.
Don't forget to scroll back up to the comments. Hey, and look for the links to Ash Gallagher's website, where you can learn more about her book. You can contribute to the effort to bring it into the world, which is amazing. And we've been following it pretty much since the day you started talking about it. I learned about Ash from Corey. So when he brags about me knowing Travis first and all that, I would never have known about Preemptive Love or Ash Gallagher were it not for my work with Corey. So
I can't even take credit for that, because that was Brian Bozen. Like between
Brian Bozen,
I would
good
love
man.
to meet Brian. I would like to meet Brian.
Yeah, but honestly, Brian Bozen needs to get on here. That's something I'm gonna actually message.
It's cool for me to like reassemble your life from meeting people from previous parts of your life, like having met now Ben McCart, having met Finley from Canada, and some of your other friends from Canada, Dan from Canada. It's cool to put your it's cool to put your life together from your sordid past. But
indeed,
it's always good. And like, that is a cool thing about what's happened in my life in the past 5 years, is this amazing circle of superhero friends that I have that have been built from talking to people about big issues, not little stuff like what's the best Marvel movie, which is cool and all, but talking about big systemic things. Has surrounded me with amazing people that do amazing work. Some of them charity people, and Casey Marion in the Thread here has donated and continues to donate to our friends at Hands of the Goddess, a local charity that helps our homeless population here, and building I forget sometimes that that's what we're doing. I don't know what we're building, but whatever it is, it's doing some good in our communities, and I just that's what makes me get up and do this every possible day. So thank you everybody for all of that.
Well, I appreciate y'all's community, and I feel privileged to be in it a little bit, even so far away in these windows of time. So y'all are just amazing folks, and I appreciate you.
Book tour, Florida stop, gotta happen.
100%.
Paperback Exchange.
It's like
Paperback Exchange on Ridge Road has your poetry book, if I'm not mistaken. It's on the calendar.
Yes, they do.
Right, so you could actually get yourself some original Ash Gallagher poetry from your local bookstore. Support two amazing things at one time. Our friend Joni Hepsworth and her wife Tammy run the Paperback Exchange on Ridge Road, which, by the way, if you haven't been in there in 5 years, you should go, because when they bought it, it turned into this amazing like community center. I don't want to say community center, but it's central to a lot of folks in the community. They do a lot of amazing charitable work with our LGBTQ community and other communities. They are always on board when we have a charity fundraiser or something like that. So support the bookstore, support Ash, support us, and we'll keep doing this. Sasquatch is real.